Okay, well, good morning, everyone. We're now having the meeting of the Nantucket Historical Commission in person for the first time since February 2020. And we have some people on Zoom, so we're having a hybrid meeting. So I've never conducted a hybrid meeting, but we'll give it a whirl. So I'll call the people on the screen who are commissioners who are attending. I see David Silver.
Good morning.
Hi, can you hear us okay?
I can, yes.
You want to turn your volume up or
No, I'm gonna
only turn it up.
I'm turning it up.
yeah.
Okay.
Much better.
And Mickey,
Hi, everyone.
Mickey Rowland's here. And at the table, Angus, do I have to introduce the people at the table? Hybrid meeting?
I don't know.
Angus, Hillary Rayford, the chair,
You should.
Tom Montgomery and Georgia Raisman, and our staff, Holly Bacchus. And we have a guest, Rita Carr from the Nantucket Preservation Trust. Hi, Rita.
Hi, sorry I'm not there in person.
It's okay, next time. I mean,
Okay.
this is a lovely trailer that we're sitting in. Can I call it a trailer? It's not very mobile. Okay, so turning to the agenda, we're a little behind in the minutes, so we don't have any minutes to approve, but we'll catch up on minutes at the July meeting. And the first item on the agenda is to discuss the surveys of historic resources. So we have the first batch of the pilot surveys of the fish lots, and I sent everyone a link. Was everyone able to did everyone try to download?
A lot of reading.
Yeah, it's a lot of reading. Yeah, so there's 31 Form Bs.
I wasn't able to get into it when they were first sent out, but then later maybe my reception was better.
Yeah, it was
I
a
was
big
able to
download.
go through it. And it's so refreshing to see so much great history in these Form Bs. I was quite impressed. I did make some notes of things that were good and might look at. So.
Folks on the screen, were you able to access the Form Bs?
Yeah, I found them. I didn't look at all of them, but I looked at a few of them. They look pretty thorough.
So Holly, do you want to can you brief the commissioners on what you're looking for as far as review and
Yes.
what the status is of
Yes.
the ongoing
Yes.
surveys and how many more we can expect and when they want feedback by?
Yes. I would like to give Pal comments on the Form Bs. I encourage if you can email me if you have them and go by the property sooner rather than later. Obviously, we're looking about I think in 2 weeks. So we've got due dates coming up, and Pal is going to give us another batch of forms. So it'll be basically what we've received so far is batch 1, even though it was under 2 separate submittals. That was batch 1. The second batch, we're going to be getting June 30th, so 2 weeks from now. So obviously between now and then, it would be great to be able to provide a whole bunch of comments if we have any substantive comments. I welcome comments from NPT. Obviously, they're really involved with these properties. They've done a lot of those researches. So obviously we'll want to be able to provide those feedback back. So June 30th, the batch 2 will be coming in. We will also be receiving the survey plan 2 report, phase 2, by June 30th. So June 30th is going to be a big day for us for that. And then the next deadline that they have provided is batch 3 forms, which would be the remaining of the list, and the pilot phase 3 report. So we're going to be getting on both by July 11th. As far as our schedule goes, they're a little bit behind by it's about 2 weeks. And really and truly, I think with the issues that they've run in cross with trying to take the NHL data and align it with the GIS data and figure it out. Obviously, this is one of the reasons why, but focusing like we asked them to do, to focus on the pilot, focus on the fish lots, be consistent, is going to be helpful. So
Holly, can we explain that for a minute?
Yes.
Just stick on that for one more minute. So this was the memo
Yes.
from May 25th. It was kind of a long, complicated memo, but as Holly just said, basically, because we have a National Historic Landmark data sheet that lists all of the properties, and that is like an official approved Park Service reference sheet, they have to make sure that all of those properties are matched to a parcel ID so that it can be included in the town GIS system.
yes.
And this is going to be a massive benefit for Holly and the HDC locally, because it means that that historic information layer that's in our town GIS, the planning department, and everybody uses will be at the touch of a button. And this was not a requirement of the survey. This was something that we as a commission said, you know, if we're going to do this, we want it to be like technologically up to date. But when Hal went through it's a lot of, there's over 3,000 structures, right?
Yeah.
So it's more than any one person can sit and want to do manually. So they matched all the addresses to the parcel IDs, working on the addresses from the GIS. Then we have our neighborhood list, which was also in the packet that we came up with, working with Holly and Pal. And they wanted to assign every parcel to a neighborhood, because when we have our survey plan, it's going to prioritize neighborhood by neighborhood, give a description of each neighborhood, and then give sort of an estimate of how long it's going to take to do and how many parcels and what they think are the likely, you know, does it need an area plan? Does it need individual surveys? Which are the resources that are most valuable to our culturally valuable there? So every parcel has to be, every address in the NHL data has to be matched to a parcel in our GIS. And that has to be assigned to a neighborhood on our neighborhood sheet so that it can be
Yes.
included in the survey
Yes.
plan. And they were able to get like 90% of that on an automated basis
Yes.
using their technology. But there's 10%. Actually, it's more than, if there's 3,000, it's more like, they said it was 800 structures. It's in the memo.
It's about 800.
I think there were
was.
800 properties that were ordered. And have to be done manually.
That's one of the questions I was going to send to Holly about what Ginny had sent. All her little sheet of caveats there that they were very confused about, even the pros or something, but Lynn just assertive about it. And I don't know if it's just a typo or what, but and what you're just referencing right now, Hillary, it was talking about, there was a 0% to 10%. I don't know if, it didn't say 0%. All it had
that
was
was
a
a
percent
typo.
sign.
That's a
And I thought,
typo,
I'm
yeah.
wondering what the other percent was, so.
I think
whatever
it's
that
less than
differential is.
10%. Yeah.
And then there was some other things in there that Ginny had put in that she was confused, or confused me anyway, about the NHA's designation between the C and NC/NC. And I've had to deal with that, some personal dealings, and I'd like to know more about that myself. And so if they can straighten that out, that would be very helpful as well.
Yes, what is really, so the data that they're using is an Excel spreadsheet that NPT received when they hired Ryan Pfeiffer, and I forget the lady's name who assisted him on that,
Right.
to update our NHL based on the CPC funds. So when they did that, it generated about 390 pages of Excel spreadsheets of
Yeah.
everything that was in existence,
Yeah.
every single property. And it went through whether or not that structure based on the NHL data was contributing or non-contributing. What makes it a little confusing is one of those records was just one property. It wasn't necessarily dividing whether or not there was multiple structures in the lot. So that's why you'll see it in a dash. Say you had an 1850s, I'll just give you a typical Nantucket that was built, and then they had a shed in the back that was built in 1990, say, for
And
instance.
that's what I think
That's
was
the-
confusing, because
yes.
they had C and
Correct.
NC within the same line, and you
Correct.
can only have one or the other.
Correct. And that's where it's been a little tricky, because obviously from a Macris perspective, the Form Bs,
Right.
we're going to want to have one form per structure. with a contributing structure. And this is the first time that this data that NPT was able to obviously get and approved through Brian and his team to update our NHL. When it was adopted, then this document really has just, it's been utilized, but not as much, quite frankly, since I've been with the town. And utilizing it for all of our review processes. And this is the first time that it's actually that raw data is being utilized with the GIS. So that was another thing that, Ginny had asked me, has the town done any of this? And I said, no, the only thing that the town, through my request to Nathan, our sole GIS guy, was could he take the list of the prominent structures that came out of the NHL update. And he did do a layer for that. It's on my GIS. We do not have a layer on the town's GIS yet, but eventually we will, which is very helpful. And I was able to give that one to help with PAL so that they're going to be able to incorporate that within the overall plan phase. So what they're doing really right now, as well as with the addendum that we're doing with their contract, which has been sent to them for their signature, to extend, to utilize that additional 5,000. So we're not wasting it. Yay, very excited about that. I'm just waiting for their contract back to us so I can give it to procurement and finalize that process. So that's good. I don't have to worry about it, even though June 30th is coming up. So yes, I would encourage any comments that the commission has on any of the individual properties, whether it's substantive, not substantive, just a question. You can, as you go through them, you'll see, they're there's boilerplate, the Form Bs, which is nice because all this information that really has been lacking on the HDC surveys, we see them and there's like a checkbox here and hardly any information really and truly. This goes down deep and down into it with references and such, and specific properties that may have a report from NPT or PIN is actually referenced as well.
Because I really don't know how they're doing this. I'm not professional at that. When Jenny uses the words cleaned up, what is she talking about?
The data,
The data.
more really, because they're utilizing GIS, our layers from
Yeah,
GIS,
okay.
they're having it to merge it in. So for instance, here's another example just on Excel, because GIS macro or GIS or Esri is one of the companies. Their format is Excel spreadsheet based, so that it can export to that. Unfortunately, the way the NHL data was included in the in the Excel spreadsheet, there was a header on every single page. So Ginny's like, unfortunately, that takes out a number line in our. So I went through the entire document and took those out and said, okay, here's now you
Like
have
70 pages.
yes, now you have a lot less. And that was helpful for them because they're having to merge their Excel spreadsheets together so it can align. And they have a GIS specialist, which is awesome. Plus, there's additional information that we're asking for, which what Hillary had mentioned, we've got the neighborhood areas. And of course, that's never been cross-referenced before. You got to think about it. This survey plan that we've created with them, this is the first ever of its kind. Even when the town, when we've gone digital, obviously, for our permitting software, Nathan had to really create a lot of those boundaries, our GIS guy. And he also had to create them to help our software, but he also utilized a lot of different. So that's where that kind of comes in. There was a lot of changes, if you will. So I'm really confident in Jenny and her team moving this and getting this in the direction that we need. And I think the additional financial aspect will also help clean that up too. So.
Yeah, I think that the cleanup is like data processing. It's a really big data
It is.
analysis task, which is why we need a professional firm to do this.
Absolutely.
We could never, when I think back about the conversations we had like 2.5 years ago when we said, okay, we need to survey, this is what we do. We had no idea how complicated it was going to be. So
Well, that's another thing. I mean, you got to think of the fact that we don't have any donut holes in our historic districts. The entire island and islands are a historic district. So there's a lot of information that needs to be compiled. And what I think is really great with us asking them to do this additional work to fix it within the fish lots, our fish lots is already our pilot. So the methodologies that they come up with to correct the data will be what they'll be able to include in the overall plan to help with the additional phases that we're going to go
Yeah.
through. So that is going to be written in the plan, which is, I think, going to be very helpful, whether PAL decides to, go through the process for our next project, or another consulting company wants to do it, that methodology will be included, which is, I think, very helpful.
Yeah, and that was really the point of that memo,
Yes.
was to brief us on the complications that they
Yes.
encountered, but also to ask for our advice about, we can't fix all the data.
No.
That's going to be part of the operations going forward, serving the different neighborhood areas, but we can do a pilot data cleanup of one neighborhood, and that will allow us to put in the survey plan and guidance to future, neighborhood surveys about how much time has to be allotted
Yes.
for that. So Holly advised them, let's just do the cleanup for the fish lots. So,
Yes.
when we have the surveys, we'll be able to match them.
Here's all the neighborhoods. I would also encourage, because I've noticed a couple of different names. For instance, I want to say Trot's Hill. It's hills.
Hills.
Exactly.
I was gonna say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also within their description, I don't know if you know this, Tom, you must. I was just recently talking to somebody about Trot's Hills in general, or Trot Hills. That there's been different throughout historic documentation. It's been written TROT apostrophe S or TROTT apostrophe S. So those type of inaccuracies historically should obviously be included within the survey plan.
Yep.
So if you see anything in the list of names that should be added, something that that Pal wouldn't know, please let me know, and I will pass that along through to Ginny.
Yeah, and just to stick on that point, this is a really, really critical part. Like, they're giving us this work now, and it's not, obviously things can be changed, but this is gonna be baked when it's
Yes.
done, and this will be it. So we want to make sure that, first of all, we have local knowledge and they don't. So there will be things like, I already noticed some misspelling, some errors, some misspellings, things like what you just brought up. So I hope for our July meeting that we can really, assuming I'm still at the table since I'm up for reappointment next week, but that we can really spend a lot of time talking about those forms and making sure we're comfortable both with the content, but also like the style, the subject areas, hearing from Mickey and Angus and Holly, who sit with the Clement, who sit with the HDC, to make sure that it's actually going to help with preservation.
Oh, I think it will.
Yeah, I think it will too, but if there's
100%.
anything that we're uncomfortable with, this is really the time. So please keep in mind that you're gonna have to dedicate some time over the next month as these come in to really go through them.
Yeah.
And note on those forms, it says the project manager is the Nantucket Historical Commission. So this has our name on it, and we need to make sure that it's done right.
Buck stops here.
Yeah. Tom, I also wanted to address your question about the contributing, non-contributing thing on the data sheet. I think that's also one of my great hopes, and I think it's shared by Holly and others, that we give this data sheet some real meaning and weight with the HTC, because they've said in meetings with us, like, well, that's the Park Service, and it's not really something. I look at our local surveys, and what we want is to give enough weight and enough kind of vetting that we can all feel confident in that data sheet. And that now when we talk about contributing or non-contributing structures, that everybody knows what that means. Because I think right now people are like in all different places in their minds about what that means. And so I hope through this process, and maybe, when we have these forms done, we can have another meeting with the HTC and really talk
It's
about that.
interesting you bring that up. I was gonna wait until we get more of this data in. But that's exactly where I was going with this, because it seems that everybody in town, including the HDC, uses the 89 survey is their bottom line base of any knowledge. And I
No,
hope that these surveys will supersede that and help everybody understand that we've got a lot more out there and we've got a lot more data now
yes,
than just that.
yes.
Well,
So,
and we have a new landmark too. I mean, we have an update to our National
Yes,
Historic
correct.
Landmark.
so that's gonna be the crux of everything. The fact that our National Historic Landmark designation that was done in 66, obviously was before the update to the entire island being a local district.
Yeah.
So I think that's very, very helpful. We know our period of significance based on that update is not going to change. And having that as, because the HDC hears from me, whether or not it's what it's listed on the NHL, because it's not all accurate. And that's kind of where their indiscrepancy, I think, has come from, because a lot of that had to be done by windshield survey. When the actually folks from National Parks, this is per Brian, when the National Park Service actually came here, when they're going through that process, they couldn't just go to all these places. They had to do a lot of windshield survey, just driving and seeing, and then reflecting it based on our tax assessor's information. And unfortunately, our tax information isn't 100% accurate, and it doesn't have to be. And that was one of the reasons why I spoke to our tax assessor and asked him over a year ago, hey, is there any chance you could put a little memo like they do with zoning? You don't go by any of that information based on the property card. You go by the actual source, which would be the map, which would be the actual HDC. One of the cool things I think really we need to, from an education perspective, is remind folks that these Form Bs are going to take place of that 89 survey. Any of those surveys that were done,
Right.
whether it was through the state's project that they did and were put on Macris, or they're the ones that are still over in the drawers over there that the town did.
Is it gonna get pulled?
They will eventually, yes. And you'll see that Macris, they will put the old one in the back. Like if they have it, we'll put it in the back.
That's what I was going with.
Yes, oh, absolutely. And one of these that we got from these draft ones for the fish lots, I actually submitted and provided it to the HDC with draft on it, because we had an application that went through HSAB about color change on one of the Greek revivals on Darling Street. And I thought, you know what, this is a good example to say, hey, look, up here's our updated HDC survey. That's basically the lingo everybody is used to seeing. And you're not going to see those old ones anymore. This is what they're going to be. So I thought that was a good, they were happy. They thought that was great. They're encouraged. I mean, they are very, very happy that we were able to do this. And I think they've been able to see that progress. You know, here's an actual information history on these structures that are before them, instead of this kind of hodgepodge of review or research, I should say, that's been just given from an agent. We want to be able to utilize that information. So I think, and that information is also going to be imperative as we go through these phase processes too. I've been keeping both mental and actual records of notes, I should say, of some of these projects that have been coming through. Okay, this is information that whoever our survey consultant's going to be for this area, they're going to need this information. So it's going to be a repetitious process, and I think this is awesome. I've given really good comments to Ginny as far as, you know, hey, I understand the fact that they've got these kind of issues going on, but they're still basically on target, on
Yeah. Yeah,
schedule.
they're doing
This
a great
this
job.
is not their first rodeo, and probably not their first rodeo of dealing with issues. They are exactly. We couldn't do this on our
I know.
own. So very, very
I'm
happy.
thrilled. So, I mean, I'm thrilled with Pal. And
Oh,
it
yes.
sounds like you are too.
Yes,
It's
very
just
much so.
perfect. So,
Holly, just a comment.
yeah.
When you go through, you need to correct the spelling of Nashaquisset on that list. I just, as I
Thank
was
you.
eyeballing it.
Thanks, Ken.
Hi, Ken. Welcome. We have a couple more. We have Ken Bogran, our guest, and Clement is here. Hi, Clement. Hi.
Muted. Hi, my dog's been barking, so
No worries.
thank you for,
Are there any other questions on the current survey before we get a quick update from Holly on the the 2022-2023.
I have a couple questions on the surveys.
Yes.
So when they do I guess certainly the photographs, but also the information on the status of the house, they cannot go on the property? Is it all done from the public way?
Correct. Correct. Public way.
Is there, to make it more thorough, could they get permission to go on site, or is that just way too much work? Or
That is not a best management practice, I guess is what you'd say from the state. They don't, yeah, because a historic district's jurisdiction is from the public way. So for these surveys, they cannot do that, even if they allowed them.
okay, I guess that makes sense. And the other question is, are they doing research in the building department? Do they see recent building permit applications and recent revisions to buildings?
I mean, there's some of them that they're actually indicating major alterations that they're able to do. But no, they don't have the time to research. So obviously any of that additional information that can be provided, and a lot of it has been very helpful from MPT. I'm going to toot MPT's horn so much because they've been extremely helpful, whether it's been a past, marker program or a restriction, that information has been given. I can't tell you how many things I've gotten from Rita and Mary, and I forwarded on to Ginny and her team, and uploaded to their system. So yeah, they've, I mean, anything that has been provided from a secondary source to pinpoint to the primary source, yes, they've been able to include. And if anybody knows anything specifically that, especially with this pilot, that could be included, they haven't included, please let me know and I'll forward it along.
It does seem that, pretty relevant information is work that's been done to a building. And if they can't dig that out, I know it'd be a ton of work for them to research every house in the building department, but it's pretty relevant information in terms of HTC review. So it just seems like it's going to be sort of hit or miss whether that info gets into the Form B or not, which I guess is just the way it's going to be.
I mean, they do have a date on here of when they were created. So I think that would be imperative when somebody comes in and wants to say, do work on one of these houses. And they get the updated Form B and they notice, oh, okay, this was created May of 2022. It would be up to, and this is going to be part of the whole system and process that I'm going to have to work on when it comes to people submitting applications to the town. I don't know if you all know, probably Angus and Mickey, you probably do. There's a form that is for historic structures. Last time it was updated was quite a few years ago. So that's been on my agenda to fix. And one of those things is I want to be able to say, hey, do you have an updated Form B? And is that included within your packet, your application? And it should be up to them to include anything like that history moving forward. Because I do understand it. It's very, very helpful for applicants to be able to provide that information. So, but I don't think we're going to be able to tackle everything. At what point do we say there's a cutoff line? They're really, I think May of 2022 is very helpful.
So when someone is aware that the Form B is missing some current information, something that might be relevant, how does that information get put into the Form B?
Well, we've got the drafts right now for the pilots of the batch 1. If you are looking at any of those particular ones and you see that there's information that's missing, just send it my way and I will make sure that Ginny gets it.
So it goes through you. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, so at our next meeting, Mickey, hopefully everyone will have had time, just maybe do one every day. There are 31 of us, so look at one every day. And by our next meeting, we'll have gone, everyone, all 7 of us will have gone through everything. And then we'll all be able to get our comments to Holly and make sure that these are as right as possible.
I mean, some of these, a couple of these in town I've done work on, and I know that I looked at one on Darling Street that hasn't mentioned the recent work that was done, so I can.
That's the information we're looking for.
That's
Yes.
our contribution.
Yes. That would be extremely helpful if you can provide that. And
What number Darling Street is that?
Number 6.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping you would say. I've done a lot of that work.
Oh,
And that was Jack Perlette's house. And I put the widow's walk on there. just for starters.
Yeah.
And I've done a great deal of work around that house. Since they bought it, since they sold it about 6 or 7 years ago, I had nothing to do with that. And they have changed it somewhat with the pergola and a few of the other things, but I can answer a lot of questions about 6 Darling Street.
Yeah. So I was involved in the work after that. So
Oh, okay, well, between the two of us, we ought to be able to update that file.
Yeah. I'm also wondering, Holly, as far as vetting these surveys, I mean, do we want to do any outreach?
I think that could get messy.
Uh-huh.
Quite frankly, I think the role of the commission to do exactly what, Ginny and her team are asking you all to do. The role of preservation folks out there like MPT to just take a look at what's been provided. I mean, I'll tell you, I've already got email back from Mary on one of the first batches. And, just things that, Pal may want to look into, or how they've worded something. These could be as very detailed or not. Give an example. And thank you, MPT, thank you, Mary and Rita. Give you an example. So on 17 Fair Street, Pal refers the structure to a typical Nantucket type dwelling. Introducing a new term instead of using typical Nantucket, which we're all used to, is a bit confusing, and I agree. And that was one of the questions that we had. I don't really remember, but we had a small meeting with PAL and MHC,
Mhm.
and that was a question that I brought up after PAL had sent us the list of what they were going to survey within the fish lots. I know they had the style type.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you have known it in typical Nantucket, and typical Nantucket's also evolved into having federal styles onto it. It was federalized at one point, not all of them, obviously. So some of them you have, hey, wait a minute, that's a, typical Nantucket 4-bay, central chimney, but it has federal attributes to it. Those are important, but wanting to keep Nantucket's typical Nantucket style because it's nowhere else in Massachusetts. They were okay with that. And we want to obviously make sure that that language, because it's been included in so many primary research. So Clay Lancaster is a good example, and even Foreman himself, he did it as well, even though he prominently researched out in Wisconsin. So my point is, yes, those are the type of things that we want to look at. Look at these forms, see how it's written. But if there's any history of the structure, like Mickey, like Tom, that is very important. I would like to be able to, specifically the one where you said you're the one who built that roof walk. Well, I think that's important to know that that's a contemporary element.
It's not a contemporary element.
Or
That's
did you
what I was
replace it?
gonna bring up, because they wanted to have a widow's walk there, and it's a monster. It's 38 feet long. And the HTC wouldn't approve it. And I said, I know that there was a widow's walk
Oh, so
on
you-
there, and I went and got the photograph,
Thank you.
took it to the HTC and
Yep.
says, and they had people in 1800s period clothing in the driveway, as you saw up at the widow's walk. I says, there they are right there.
Right.
And they were allowed to.
That's what we like. We like to see that. So yes, if you look, did you not see that photo in here? Because maybe it was a photo that you got from NHA.
I don't know.
Don't
I
remember?
haven't seen that, no.
Okay, so that's perfect. That is perfect, because here you got prime example of a historic photograph showing that feature, because it's one thing that Mary and I have actually talked about. There's so many, we have to look at why all of a sudden we're getting a lot of the requests for roof walks on older houses. That would have been a feature that they would have removed because they didn't need it anymore. And obviously supply chain, we had supply chain issues way back then, not just now. So those type of things, that's important. So please email me that information.
Okay.
So, thank you. Do you want me to dive into the
Well,
section?
are there any last questions from anybody about the other surveys that you want to kind of move along, but
Well, I looked at the surveys and there were some trends that I thought moving forward, and I can just forward the comments to Jenny. I don't know if we want to discuss them, but just the general descriptions of trim. I don't know if you noticed this, Mickey, but they're described as a wood surround or raised casing. And they were almost interchangeable of what was a 1x4 or 5/4x4
Mm.
as a plank frame, 2 inches by 3 inches. And then there was one lot, I think it was on Eagle, that had the lot line crossed right through a house. So I was wondering if that was a GSI.
I saw that as well.
And then there was a type 2 fence that was described as a modern wood railing
Oh,
type. And I kind of think of that as like our standard of not modern.
So can I make a suggestion, Angus? So next, the July meeting will be all about feedback on the forums.
Can we tell
So,
that?
yeah, why don't you hold them and keep your comments with the individual forums, and then we can all like consolidate our comments and discuss it and
Sounds
workshop it and give it all to Holly to give to Jenny in an organized way. Rather than having things sort of, if she gets, 7 people all saying her random comments or.
I mean,
Holly getting-
that's fine. It doesn't bother me. I've been compiling them, so as well as my own comments.
Well, would you like people to send the comments to you? in
You know,
groups
that
and
would probably
drafts, or
be
you
the-
wanna do it all together?
Yeah, I have not, quite frankly, I have not confirmed with Jenny when she would like comments. She does know that we were discussing this today and that the commissioners received them to review. I would like to confirm with her when she would like them back.
Yeah.
I was thinking, she's given us something on June 30th. It would be nice for us to give her something on June 30th. Kind of be consistent, if that's okay.
Okay, so we can all send, as you go through it, it sounds like Holly would like to have your comments as you have them ready, and Holly will take the lead on consolidating that.
Yes. That would be-
Okay, and then, but I do want to go over all the comments, so if we'll send them to you.
Yep.
You can consolidate them, we'll all look at them in July.
Yep.
Because then that'll be interesting for everybody in the public to
Yep.
hear. All right, so quick update, you had a May 26 coordinators update on the new grant.
Yes, so unfortunately, that was when I was home with COVID. Sorry, I hope anybody else didn't have any of that. So I informed them that I was not going to be able to Zoom in. There was no way. Unfortunately, I was home. Obviously, we're all quarantined too. So I did not, but I did obviously touch base with Michael and Peter. I've received a copy of the manual. I didn't bring mine with me, but I have literally a binder of the manual. They had some substantive changes to it from last year to this year. They did, and I will pull that up. They did email us back the proposed scope for our next grant. In it, they didn't have any major changes to it, which I thought was fantastic. Oh, sorry, this is a different computer I've never been on, so bear with me. Yeah, accept and start. Okay, here we go. So they had no changes. Peter said, nope, you guys are good to go. What he did tell me, because I said, okay, well, what else should I be working on? For the last grant, the current grant we're working on now, we gave them a list of what would be an attachment A1, a list of all the properties. So our next phase, there'll be cleaning, obviously going towards the fish lots and finalizing the fish lots, and then moving to Brant Point is what we asked them to do. So I said, okay, well, can you give me some guidance on how many surveys are we talking about? How many structures? He told me 140 is what that would be. So that would be to finalize the fish lots areas based on the survey plan layout that PAL has created, which they've updated that too on their online version, and I will send that link to the commission. But it's all color coded, which is pretty cool. Delineated all those areas that we came up with. And they've actually have the what I call situs points for each property within the fish lots. Pretty, ones that they've been working on for this current pilot. So this next one, they have no issues, like I said, with our scope. So this has already been included within a draft RFQ that I've been working on. So all of this is fine. Obviously, the timeframes, I had to make sure it matched up with the what they indicate in the manual, see 140. So basically what I've been working on my own, and I obviously need to get vetted through you all, is the list. I've been taking the maps of what we have already asked for with the current project in the fish lots and seeing what the residual is. What are these lots that we need to finalize with this next project? So this is my working document that I've created, where literally the boundary of the fish lots, these are the ones that are not included in this current pilot. Pine, a lot of them pines, raised quartz, silver, pleasant. So that's what I have so far. I want to see how many that's going to be within the fish lots. And then obviously whatever the residual of that number is to get up to 140, then go over to Brant Point. I didn't know if the commission has thought a little bit further on where. We really didn't dive into exactly where in Brant Point.
Yeah.
If you want your preservation planner's opinion on that, based on what we've been seeing with the HDC for submittals, I would say sticking with the boundaries of Brant Point area, meaning Easton Street, Holbert Avenue, maybe trying to circulate. And I don't know how many properties are on there. I will also have to look at the original 1989 surveys, because Macris has a lot that are on there, but I've also noticed over the last few years, there's a lot that have been demolished and not included, not actually indicated that they've been demolished, or demolished and something new is there. So those are some things to think about. I think we picked that because it's we're seeing a lot of, as far as changes as far as historic structures being elevated, or we're seeing some demo moves. And we wanted to kind of go to those type of areas. So I didn't know what the commission was thinking about, but I'll leave it at that.
I have a question, Holly. So for the money that we were given, it's a total of $40,000 project, right? Did we get 20 total?
We got 20.
Yes. So it's a $40,000 project. So
Yes.
how many structures, how many Form Bs totally?
Peter told me 140.
140 totally.
Yes.
So
Yes.
maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I know we discussed, well, first of all, we left ourselves wiggle room in our
Yes.
grant request to take feedback from PAL. So, because the idea is we're gonna follow the survey plan.
Yes.
Have we had a discussion with PAL or?
I have not. They know that we've received that grant.
Yeah,
But I have not had any further discussion about where that would take us. And, I mean, I think that is probably a good idea to talk to Jenny, to let her know. I don't want to assume that they're going to be obviously submitting a proposal for us. If they're going to, answer that request for proposals, but, or quotes. But I think that is a good idea to see, because obviously, there's a reason why we all through the grant application picked Brant Point.
because we felt it was
Correct.
under a lot of pressure and.
Correct. So that I think is very, very helpful, but I don't know where they've come up with yet. And maybe when we get this next report, their survey plan report will be June 30th. And that is really to dive into, where's my notes here? That is the field recognizance survey, establish survey methodology, plans and priorities, determine threats to areas and resources, complete their recognizance survey. So they'll be coming back to Nantucket to do that, I would think. I gotta confirm, but and identify, they may have combined those, so never mind. But the crux of this part of the survey plan is to go over their methodology of and prioritizing. So I don't know where Brant Point with their list of areas falls into their area of prioritizing. And then individually, in Brant Point, here's another thing, is one of the largest areas that is densely populated. So
Yeah.
that's another thing to throw out there. We didn't really segment it at all.
Yeah,
So that also includes, over to Jetty's Beach.
yeah, and all those little cottages there.
Right.
So I'm looking at the grant. So we said we wanted to conduct a community-wide survey to assess and document like approximately 160. We had to guess, so it's
Yep.
gonna be 140.
Yep, not too bad.
From 2 neighborhoods, the Fish Lots and Grant Point.
Yes,
So I think we want to have an element of priority, as we didn't want to just go and finish the fish lots. We wanted to
Right.
do the high priority places in the fish lots, which we wanted Pal to advise us on.
Yep.
And then do the high priority in terms of, there's some continuum of importance and threat.
Yep.
Right, so if it's highly threatened, but maybe less important, it would still be done. If it is highly important, it would still be done, even if it was less threatened. So can I suggest that, we've been working in a small group, Holly,
Mhm.
to kind of move these, the discussion of the survey work in between. So maybe it's time to have another small group meeting and loop in Betsy Tyler.
Yep.
And we can do that, and then we'll maybe find out from Pal if they would like to advise us a little bit more, maybe after they get their survey, the survey plan phase 2 report to us at the end of the month. So maybe sometime in the first couple weeks of July, we can have a small group meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, can we move on to the next item on the agenda?
Absolutely.
All right, but before we do that, I just want to say, Holly, thank you. You're doing an amazing job with this.
Thank you.
And I mean, I know you don't need to be thanked because like you love this, it's what you live for, but
Mhm.
I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
We do.
Yeah. So, thank you. We're lucky to have you. Okay, the next item is protecting and maintaining Grant Point Light and Great Point Light. So at our last meeting, we decided to pursue 2 avenues with these important structures for our cultural history and our landmark. Regarding Great Point, we observed that the structure is crumbling and has structural integrity problems, that it's not eligible for protection because it's not a registered historic structure. And it's not eligible for grants. And it's, that is what it is. So we had some follow-ups, which is to investigate whether or not we as a sort of part of the certified local government program could nominate it directly to the MHC for consideration as to be included on the National Historic, on the Register of Historic Places. And the second follow-up was to have some discussions with the trustees about their outlook and, what they wanted to do, if anything. And the third follow-up was to see if we could maybe get some attention from a certain important person in our country who loves Nantucket. So on the last point, I did reach out to somebody who, knows somebody well and who could maybe get a message to the White House, and that message was communicated. There's been no response. I mean, I think it's extremely unlikely that our president would intervene with the White House. But anyway, I did do that, and I will keep you posted if I hear anything back. And I think everybody should continue to talk to their well-connected friends who know people in government, and talk it up and see if there can be some movement. As far as talking to the trustees, I did have a conversation with the director of the Cape and Islands region. So the way the trustees is organized is that they have their CEO, who is new, and I'm actually forgetting his name right now, but I've met him anyway. He's new in the last 6 months. And then they have kind of the next level are these regional supervisors across the Commonwealth. So I spoke with the regional supervisors based on the vineyard who's responsible for the area. Of course, I've also spoken with Diane Lang many times, but she's, our local superintendent of the refuge. So it's really the managerial track that we need to talk to. And what I learned from the trustees was that they had like a contractual agreement to make cosmetic repairs to Great Point, e.g. painting it. And they also had, you know, they have the keys, they can access the lighthouse. The land that the lighthouse is on is owned by the Fish and Wildlife. Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of the Interior. So it's not actually owned by the Coast Guard, which is an interesting complication. But what I learned from the trustees is that that contract has expired and they have not sought to renew it. So obviously they're the neighbors, they work closely with the Coast Guard, they work closely with the Fish and Wildlife Service, but they are sort of at the point where they're wondering, we don't really want responsibility for this lighthouse because
Who's this, the
the
trustees?
trustees, because the painting it is just a Band-Aid. She said, you know, you go inside, it's raining paint chips. It's no place for the public to be in. It's covered with mold. So what they want is they want to have a scope of work of what it would take to fix the lighthouse. And they feel that if they had that scope of work, that would be something that they could then take to the Coast Guard. And they are having discussions with a woman named Jacqueline, who's based in Providence, who's in their structural group. But they are having discussions. They would like to have the lighthouse fixed, but they do not want to foot the bill. I mean, an estimate like that, I don't know how much to get an estimate like that costs. Maybe it's $25,000 just to get somebody out there to do the estimate, to do the scope of work. They don't feel that they should be paying for that 100%. They would like the Coast Guard to do that, or at least pay for part of it, or they would like to have an earmark to have the Commonwealth pay for part of it. So that's where, that's the discussion that I had with the trustees, which is they want a scope of work so that they can get the Coast Guard to make the repairs. And they feel that approaching the Coast Guard with a specific ask is necessary. They recognize that they could also just bug the Coast Guard to do the scope of work. But then maybe they feel maybe they'd have more success if they had the scope of work. So far, everybody has been supportive of the idea of our nominating it or pursuing the evaluation, the investigation of could it be nominated to be considered a historic structure. So on that point, I had a conversation with Michael Steinitz, the deputy SHPO at the Mass Historical Commission. He's the person we've been interacting with many times about our survey. So I've got to know him, as has Holly. And you know, I would say, so I think I put the notes in the packet. Yeah, okay. So those in the packet are the notes from my call with him. He encouraged us to try. I would say he was skeptical. But he said, you know, the Park Service has been somewhat fluid with the 50-year rule, you know, maybe 37 years is enough. Focus on the story of Kennedy's involvement. That might be an interesting story that makes it worthwhile. He did quip that, you know, it wasn't a very good reconstruction. And can you hold up this book? Can I have this book? So I got a copy of this book. I'm sure some of you have it. And I learned a lot structurally about the prior light, which was a true masonry light. And it's really, really sad that it was not relocated because it was solid granite blocks. And it doesn't sound like any of those blocks were recoverable or salvaged.
I want to say, I remember my great grandfather having a piece of it. Of granite. Do you remember that?
I have one too.
Yeah. So see, but they,
We need a granite
and I don't
drive to bring them all back.
I don't know
Shouldn't
if
say
that
on
was,
television.
yeah, but they put him on a plaque and it said part of Great Point and it had a whole bunch of history on it. I don't know if that was part of you know, trying to fundraise. I have no idea, but I know he had one.
But my issue is right at the moment is if it's structurally unsound. I, having been a trustee and not trustee, a ranger up there, we used to give tours, and sometimes we did private tours. Barry Thurston still drives a four-wheel drive tour bus full of tourists up there and gives tours of the lighthouse. I don't know if they're doing it now because I haven't gone for 2 or 3 years. But if they're doing that, and the thing is structurally unsound, I don't think that's, you know, pretty
I think
smart.
they're rethinking that, actually.
I think they better rethink that real well.
So,
It's
just,
it's 70 feet tall, and even
Yeah.
if they're in the driveway,
yeah,
I mean, if that thing comes down, who knows where it's gonna wind up?
yeah.
It's Ken.
Ken.
The point that I want to raise from town administration's point of view is while it is clear that this is an iconic, both of these are iconic structures. Since neither of them are historic, we have trouble with respect to spending staff and other time dealing with this because of the fact of so many other things that have to be done with respect to the resources that the town has in this area. And so, you know, while we recognize that it would be really nice if there was a way to be able to get the people who are actually responsible for doing it to do something, we don't believe that it is appropriate to spend staff time on this because of the fact that they are not historic, and the feedback that we're getting is the likelihood of them being considered to be historic and to be eligible is not great. So we're not trying to discourage anybody from seeing what can be done, but we just don't believe that it is appropriate to be able to spend town resources on this at this particular point in time.
And when you say these,
The
I mean-
two lighthouses that we're talking about, Brant Point.
well, Brand
and-
Point is very historic.
Individually significant.
Yeah. I'm a
Great
little
points,
I'm
not.
sorry, I don't understand, Ken.
I think what Ken is saying is it might not be the original structure. However, its location and its stature is that it is literally the second oldest lighthouse
Correct.
in the United States, second only to Boston Light.
Yeah, it's a
Yep.
1901 lighthouse. I mean, it is on the National Register of Historic Places.
Yeah.
Ken,
It's in its own form area
yeah,
too.
it's individually significant.
And
But
individually.
that, I just wanted to clarify, but Ken, that is the town's prerogative, and Holly, we're not asking you to spend any of your time on this, okay? I mean, obviously, you're coming to our meetings and we're talking about it, but this is our time.
We have no problem with individuals spending their time to do it because obviously they are iconic structures. They're important to the character of the island, but within the scope of the Historic District Commission itself, it wasn't clear to us that was where town resources should be spent at this particular point in time. That's not to say that that couldn't change as we move forward.
Yeah, so so I think we're planning, well, what I wanted to discuss, because it's confusing with the two lighthouses, they're really different profiles. So let's just sticking on Great Point. So we're hearing from Ken that the town doesn't want to spend employee resources, although that might change. At this point, that's the outlook, which, you know, we hear that. I'd like to have a discussion among this group about the idea of nominating it, because there are really two paths forward with Great Point. One is to get some, you know, the pros and cons of this idea of doing this updated scope of work. So taking the 2015 study and updating it. Who would do that? Is it a good idea? Who would pay for it? That's one. And two is preparing this request for a determination of eligibility for the National Register. That is a research job, which, you know, we could do on a volunteer basis. A lot of towns do that. Their historical commissions do it on a volunteer basis, or we could hire somebody for a couple $1,000s to do the research. I mean, I would think that would be at most to do the research and prepare that. So what does everybody think?
Well, if having a designation is going to facilitate the preservation of either of these landmarks, or with the
With
Great
Great Point,
Point,
yeah.
it's, I feel like that's our duty, that we're obligated to do that. I'm from what we've been talking about, I'm not getting an indication that anyone's thinking that this is unlikely. I'm not hearing that it's a slam dunk, but I'm not discouraged in pursuing designation.
Okay,
Hillary, does the do the trustees of reservations feel that that designation would help them vis-a-vis getting the Coast Guard to take any kind of responsibility for repairing it?
the trustees supported the idea of pursuing a registration for this structure. And just to be clear, what the registration does is it prevents the Coast Guard from intentionally demolishing it. Now, it may be that the Coast Guard has to agree to list it. So there's a lot of unknowns, but that's what we would decide to try to figure out. But if it is not a registered historic structure, there's nothing preventing the federal government from deciding it's unsafe. We're gonna have a pole with a light on it.
I think it's like an element of our historic character that's worth pursuing the nomination for.
I do also, and I mentioned this to you, Hillary, that if you look in the packet, this is straight out of the CLG information about it. We would have to get chief elected officials approval with that process. So that is very, very important that we need to realize to get that support. And I would hate to see time, effort go into something without having that support at the get-go. I don't know if Ken has additional advice on that based on what he had just said. But again, I would hate to see all that time, effort, and possible money to go into research and having the form submitted when you really look at the guidance in here where it says that the chief, our select board chair would have to sign off on.
Does anybody think that Jason Bridges would say, no, I don't want to nominate this as a historic structure?
I
I
don't
mean,
see
that
that.
seems really.
I don't know
amazing.
how anyone on the island,
Yeah.
I understand the town's position of we don't want to spend money at this point on this pursuit, but I can't imagine anyone resisting
Nomination.
the nomination.
Are we missing something? Is there any downside to nominating a structure? I mean, then.
No,
you could
I
just
mean,
say no.
I just think that maybe now is the time to request from the select
Yeah.
board on whether or not, here's the issue, it's public, it's been out there.
Yeah.
People know that there's concern with both of our lighthouses. One is historic, one is not. However, one does have that associated with feeling, and there is a possibility it could be nominated through the CLG. We are CLG. Explain the process. Is this something that the town is willing to pursue?
So this is
Hold on. Is this something that the town's willing to pursue?
For the purpose of getting the Coast Guard and the trustees of reservations involved in preserving it. I mean, that's all the town has to do.
Right.
Agree to help. Yeah.
Right, I just,
Well, I think Holly's just saying it's time to ask.
I
It's time to ask
think-
sooner, and I completely agree, and that was actually what I was gonna ask the commission. I think it's time to send a letter to our select board. A part of our role is to advocate for the protection of these historic resources. So again, there's another discussion about Grant Point, but as far as Great Point goes, I think I was going to suggest as a next action that we summarize our discussion and our findings now that we've had preliminary discussions. And we ask the select board, what level of support they would like to give, what level of direction, and make some proposals. And then,
and I do think it is important that, this is part of the CLG. Maybe that's something that wasn't really necessarily thought of. It's been included, but explain that this is something that the certified local government is allowed to do. And in this case, we've had for me, I've always gone up to that particular Great Point lighthouse. So I think there's that sense of place. And if this is something that the town really should be behind on before this commission moves forward. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Does anyone on the screen have any comments about the direction with Great Point? What's on the table now is that we would send a memo to our town manager and the members of the select board, advising them that, basically advising them that this group figure out how to nominate the structure, or figure out if it's likely to be, if it's possible to nominate it. It's going to be a process. We might decide we don't think it's appropriate to nominate it. I don't know what we're going to learn, but we like to work on it, and we would like to do it with their support.
Yeah, this is
Hillary, this is Clement. I agree. I totally agree. I think we've got to move forward. This is what the Historic Commission is supposed to do, and that we are certified local government. So all of those things are in line. I understand Ken's representation that the town has decided they are officially saying that as of now, they don't want to spend any more money or time for their employees to work on this. So I think all we have to do is perhaps get their stamp of approval and not ask for time or money, but just acknowledge that we have their support if we move forward.
And if I may, just with the caveat that if it gets far through the process, as your certified local government coordinator, I would have to, it looks like, present to the state review board. So if we do get that far, there is part of staff time that would have to
Well.
be included. But I mean, that, again, we're here for preservation. So
And as Ken was saying, the attitude of the town would possibly change if there was more likelihood that this is a nomination. So if we get the support from the select board or from the town, and we get into the process enough to see that we can move forward, that it would require your time to present, then we might get a different attitude from the town.
You couldn't have said it any better for me, Angus. Thanks.
Okay, great. I do have one question about the money, because preparing this we have to prepare a national register nomination. There's a tremendous amount of research. And I mean, is anyone raising their hand to do this research and prepare this nomination? I mean, I've always been the go-to person with research and reports, and I do it out of love. But it would be really nice if we could hire a consultant to do this research. So
I think we should definitely hire a consultant to do this. I don't remember where we stand with if we ever were given any kind of slush money, or if we have to apply for a grant to do this research. I don't know, but I think a professional, this is our first go at something like this. So it would, and it's very important. So I would want to get some money to have it professionally done. Plus, Hillary has a lot of other things that she's doing right now. So.
yeah, and we all do. Tom.
I'd like to add to what Clement just said. While we appreciate everything that you've done, and you've certainly done a lot of work on this, I think hiring a professional might actually save us some money. Where they're not going to make the mistakes that you or I or somebody else that doesn't really know the landscape, what they're doing, would do. They'll know what to do, and they get it done and charge the fee, and it's over. And
Yeah.
we got all the information.
Right. So Holly and Ken, would the town, I mean, I think this, I know, all the research that's being, Clement, the Sconset Trust is doing these house histories, and they are at a level that would be National Register quality.
Yes.
How much do you pay for each one? I thought it was $1,700.
It ranges, of course. I think that the top is probably 2,000.
So we're looking for $1,500 to $2,000 to
Oh, well,
prepare.
yeah. Mhm. The difference is I've seen it, and Angus brought this up too. Our house profiles include interiors and something that the Form Bs do not. We're actually having some trouble turning our house profiles into Form Bs. So I think these two entities are more difficult than I thought they were. So I don't know if you would call, if we would require just a survey or a Form B on the lighthouse, or if it would require an entire profile of the history and the interiors and everything else.
Would be an entire profile,
I
because
think
it
so.
needs to be like a National Register nomination, which is way more intense
Okay.
research.
Yeah.
And it's, we especially would need to expound upon the story of Kennedy, how this was rebuilt, because we have to talk about the history of this location as the historic site of a lighthouse over many years. But then we also have to talk about how the structure came to be, the story of the community. That we have to substantiate that it is significant on a state and local level. It's not significant on a national level, but on a state and local level, that it is culturally significant, that there is a lighthouse, and that this process of recreating this lighthouse is more than just a replica, like that it in and of itself is intrinsically meaningful to our Commonwealth. And given the involvement of Senator Kennedy, you know, when it was rededicated at its 30-year or 25-year anniversary, Reggie Kennedy came out, and, or sorry, Reggie Kennedy came out to do the dedication. So there's a lot of history there. And I think that is what is going to turn on, because the structure itself is not architecturally distinguished.
Right.
It's compromised. It's
Which
going
is
to
why-
turn on this, on this story.
Well, and I love the story of how the engineers figured out how to make the cement and the stones and everything else. So all of that's got to be part of the story.
There might be some, you know, Fran Cartoonin did that memo, and the people who built it are still around. I mean,
Ricky Ramus.
yeah, Ricky
Yeah, his
Ramus
dad.
did it, and
Yeah.
Tell you something about it.
The oral history.
yeah, and Andy Lowell sent me some pictures with his brother up there on the lighthouse waving. So it's definitely locally significant, the reconstruction of this.
Not to mention that it does front on a TCP, traditional cultural property, which is the Nantucket Sound.
Yeah, that could be. So anyway, just regarding the money, I mean, could the town, could this town that has quite strong free cash flow find $2,000 for research of a cultural? I mean, we'd like to hire someone outside the town to do it, but this commission doesn't have money. So, you know, could the town, if you're not, I know staff time is precious and limited, but could we find $2,000 to do this research?
I think the Historic Commission should make a request to the town manager to see whether or not there are that amount of funds in their budget to fund this, and be specific with respect to the nature of the consulting agreement and how to make the determination as to who the consultant is, as to whether or not this needs to be by means of an RFP, or how to choose who the consultant would be to be utilized in terms of if the funding were granted.
And on that note, I would recommend that the standards that the state sets forth about professional requirements is also used.
Yep.
And it's
As
very
a
specific
CLG.
based on, well, no, based on the Secretary of Interior standards for identifying professionals within the architectural and
Yeah, you have to have a
preservation,
certain amount of experience or degree.
which
of
is listed in our
activities.
RFQ.
Yeah.
So that's a boilerplate, and I think that would be imperative to include.
All right, so we will work up a letter describing the situation and making a request for funds for research to prepare a national register listing nomination, and we'll discuss that at our next meeting. Do we need to vote on that? Let's take a vote. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we adopt Ken's proposal, and anybody wants a second that?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, starting with people on the screen, David,
Aye.
Clement,
Aye.
Mickey,
Aye.
and we're all in the room, so we don't have to roll call, or we,
Aye.
aye. Anyone opposed? No, okay, so that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, Hillary, just a point of order.
Yes.
Even because it is a hybrid meeting, even those in the room need to roll call.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Ken.
We don't know that, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, Angus,
Aye.
Georgia,
Aye.
Thank you, Ken.
Tom,
Aye.
and I'm also an aye, so that passes. Okay, so Brant Point. Brant Point is a listed historic structure. And Holly has had discussions over the past couple years about getting it painted and getting some of the deferred maintenance taken care of with the local Coast Guard. And they've been wanting to do it. Holly, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understood from the email she kindly shared is that they've been wanting to do it, but it has lead inside it. So their
Yes.
policy is that the lead has to be remediated
Yes,
before they can send coasties in to fix it.
yes. And they also tested the walkway. Walkway's fine, thank God. I said there's a lot of people that have weddings and whatnot there, but yeah, they tested the area as well.
What has lead in it?
Apparently the lighthouse itself,
Inside,
inside and outside, my
is
understanding.
it paint or?
That he didn't get into specifics. And unfortunately, that particular Coast Guard personnel, I guess, is not involved with this part anymore, or has maybe transferred somewhere else. And so now there's actually somebody else in Providence that I need to contact that would know
Okay,
more,
This is Jacqueline.
possibly, but I think it
Yeah.
was a male that
Oh.
they gave me. So there is somebody else that would know more, would also be able to provide more information on where they are in the process, as far as they have a list of deferred maintenances of lighthouses, unfortunately, of across the
There's
country.
37,000 historic aids to navigation.
There's a lot. And we're, you know, on the bottom, you know, we're not quite on the bottom, but we're not on the top, put it that way. Unfortunately, the person that I spoke to was relaying a message. So there is somebody I do need to contact to find out more specifics on what's going on. As far as decommission goes, kind of like what happened with Sconset Trust was able to acquire Sankaty. They're looking out maybe a dozen years before they would decommission. So that's definitely out of the question, as well as who would take it on. That's a big question. Who would take it on
Yeah.
from the,
But I want to ask a little bit more about that, Holly. I mean, so the way, there's a process to convey these historic structures. It's governed by the Park Service. If you Google it, you can get information. And they identify structures that they want to convey and put them on a list. Then municipalities or nonprofits can raise their hand and they will be given the structure and the land. I guess that's a negotiation. And if nobody wants to take it, then they sell it. But so I'm sorry, there's one thing I forgot to mention. The other thing that's happened since our last meeting is that I was contacted by a gentleman who works for Blank Rome. It's a very well-known lobbying firm and law firm, and they have a big maritime practice. And he wanted to just have an informational discussion, and I was happy to talk with him. It was incredibly interesting. He looped in two people to this conversation. one of the gentlemen had worked for the Coast Guard in Massachusetts, where he was responsible for Boston Harbor Light. And he worked on the conveyance of that. And now he's a lobbyist. So they also had a woman who was a maritime lawyer. So maritime law is like its own thing.
Yes, please.
So what that was just an informational meeting. I figured, why not talk to these people and learn what I can learn? But they basically were like, look, we're out here. If you or somebody else wants to, hire advocates who can map the Coast Guard for you, who know everybody already because they work there and can have these discussions, because it takes an act of Congress. We're here. And we love to, have more conversations. So regarding Brant Point Light, I actually have a question for Clement. Clement, when the Sconset Trust decided to get involved in 2007, was Sankaty proactively decided by the Coast Guard to be on that list, or did you approach the Coast Guard and say, this lighthouse is going to go over the edge? We need to move it, and we need to do it now when we can still get the vehicles around it. Did you initiate that?
I believe it was initiated by the Coast Guard because it was originally not in Sconset Trust hands. It was originally going to go to the NHA, which after thinking about it, decided they didn't want it. So didn't want the responsibility. So the trust stepped in, and it originally went to the NHA and then directly to the trust. So it was, I believe, the Coast Guard's, there was a group of people in Sconset who identified the risk of it falling over. And then I believe the Coast Guard decided that they did not want to pay for the process of moving it. And they put it on the decommission list so it could pass to the NHA, which then passed it to us. So there was from the beginning a group, but the Sconset Trust did not originally initiate this, or
So the
individuals.
private group initiated.
It was a private group. Yes.
Yeah, but it sounds like they approached the Coast Guard and said, hey, it's going to go over, and the Coast
It's
Guard
gonna
said,
go
we'll put you
over.
on the list.
Yeah, I believe that was the case. It's going to go over. I was not involved in, but it's going to go over, and it's obviously going to be very expensive, and we will accept the responsibility to pay for it if it comes to us. So I think it was obviously a money issue, and
Yeah.
it did have to become an act of Congress.
Yes, yeah, that's part of it in every case.
That's
So,
Kennedy.
Ken, I have a question for you. Maybe Holly knows something about this too. What are the sensitivities? The structure that has the scallop hatchery, maybe you know this, Tom, as well. So that structure where we have the scallop propagation, that is actually owned now. Was that conveyed by the Coast Guard to the town of Nantucket Department of Natural Resources?
I don't know the answer to it, but I know that we have taken the responsibility and we have done all the work with respect to the restoration and the use of it. I off the top, I don't know that, but I know that we run it as if we have all the responsibility. So
would the town have any concerns? I mean, everyone's going to have an opinion about this, and we need to hear everybody's opinion. But does anybody know if the town would have any concerns, given our involvement with the hatchery there, if some private group, not the town, was maintaining the Brant Point structure?
I mean, obviously they didn't have any problems with it with respect to the Sankaty Lighthouse. So I don't know the answer to that, but I think that to the extent that there can be a solution that provides an ongoing basis and make sure that there is no sort of hidden or follow-up a liability on behalf of the town, that's clearly something the town would explore, be willing to explore.
Does the town own the land that the hatchery sits on at this point, or is that still owned by the Coast Guard?
I think that's still owned by the Coast Guard. I think that's
It's all,
always state parcel.
that entire parcel is owned by the Coast Guard, and I guess we had either a lease or a license to be able to be there.
So what I'm thinking about is, so the role of the historical commission is to identify historic resources that are important to the town and advocate for their preservation, to coordinate between nonprofits, to communicate to other boards in the town and communicate to other government agencies. So it would be, so I'm thinking, well, how can we as historical commission promote the preservation of Grant Point, which is a historic structure and iconic for Nantucket's tourism? And one of the ways that we could do that is to help organize and communicate to people who might want to take on this structure because it's consistent with their mission. When I say people, I mean a nonprofit. I mean, it could be the town with a friends group, but I think in their groups that have, there are towns where that's been done. Newburyport did that. The town can let us know if they would like to do that. I don't know. But in this case, I'm thinking if we could organize and communicate to make it easier for a nonprofit who would like to take on Grant Point, to make it easier so they understand what has to be done, to lend our voice and the town's voice to say we would support you, we would support this. There's only so much we could do, but still we would support it. We would talk to the Coast Guard, who we obviously have a relationship with. We would talk to the Park Service and the Mass Historical Commission saying that we support this. I think that would be an appropriate role and helpful for this commission to do. And I wondered if anybody else agreed or disagreed, or if we could have some discussion about what that would really mean.
I think as you're thinking this through, I think to get a reaction to the town's willingness to do it, I think that there would need to be a plan of the approach in terms of what the ideas are, what the objectives are, who does it, and what hopefully the end result is of the process in terms of being able to come to the town to determine and again ascertain the willingness or the extent of which the town can or is prepared to participate at this particular juncture.
Okay. Holly, I think you've been asked not to work on this, but you've had these conversations. So do you want to continue to have these conversations with the Coast Guard, or do you want to pass that over to somebody else? Or
I would like to request that
to be
able to do that. I already have that dialogue, and I'd like to follow up on that. So I was going to ask that.
Okay, so you'll express to the town that you want to continue to have these discussions. So could we have the discussions in a coordinated way, Holly? Like, could we have a working group about Grant Point? Because it's not really clear yet. Like, so you said you got the feedback 10 to 12 years, and I'm respectfully saying I think that's negotiable, but I don't actually know.
Right.
And it's, it's certainly, we've got a big bureaucratic organization where that decision of if this is going to be deaccession is probably not the decision of the person you were speaking with.
Correct.
So,
I mean, one of the first person I spoke to, and again, it was public concerns that started this conversation. And there was a lady that really got the ball rolling. Her and I connected, and she connected me with this Coast Guard representative. And that conversation has been so many different things. We know how federal government works. So it would be nice to be able to continue that discussion with this additional contact. Sounds like this person is not involved, blah, 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 blah. But I think one of the biggest thing is I asked in my phone conversation was, well, here is a significantly well-known historic structure that everybody who knows Nantucket sees goes by, what have you, and it's in deplorable condition, and it's pretty sad. And I said, you know, that we have now, we are a certified local government, we've been able to apply for federal funding. Congress allocates lots of money for historic preservation. Don't they allocate some for their own historic resources that are, may not necessarily be owned by the National Park Service, but are owned by federal government agencies
Yeah.
like the Coast Guard?
And what they say.
Isn't there, well, and I do know this, if you look at the National Historic Preservation Act of 66, each federal agency is required to have a preservation officer. That's
Mhm,
first and
yes.
foremost.
And that was told, Michael Steinitz told me that,
Yes,
and he said he would find out that person.
perfect. That would be that would be the person I would love to speak to, because they, now granted, each doesn't necessarily mean that they're a preservation expert. That's the
Right.
thing. And that's one thing I've learned through other means of processes to understand. Sometimes they just delegate somebody, hey, you're going to be their officer because guess what, it's required. And they don't really know anything about preservation. So I'm hoping that this particular officer actually has a little bit of cultural resource background and understands why Nantucket, why our citizens, why our visitors are concerned for this historic resource. So that's kind of, you know, what I've been thinking. What they must have some sort of tap in to that federal money. We shouldn't have to be going, hey, we're gonna do a nonprofit and we're gonna be piling money. But unfortunately, that's kind of the biggest thing is they said that, you know, if the town or a local nonprofit had funding that they were able to provide, that would probably bump us up in the list as far as maintenance goes.
Yeah, yeah, which we do.
I
I
mean,
mean, we
there's,
have a path to that.
yeah, so there's a lot of different concerns and questions
Okay.
and yeah.
Other comments from commissioners about a path to help? So what we're talking about is to work together, staff and commission and town admin, to develop an understanding of the process of conveying a historic lighthouse structure to a nonprofit so that we can make it easier for a nonprofit to emerge and, you know, understand how they could take over. And I think we can all think of like probably 3 nonprofits that might, you know, want to do this. So, and it might, you know, it may be that nobody raises their hand, but it's going to be really, really hard for a nonprofit to decide to prioritize this with everything, how busy everybody is. If it's confusing, opaque, you know, if we haven't made it easier. So that's kind of the idea. Discussion, what do people think? Other ideas? People on the screen, Mickey or Clement or David?
No, I agree, Hillary. I think that would be the best thing to do, is to try to wade through the quagmire and see what we could do. I know there's so many people out there that would love to be part of the Friends of Brant Point. But how we get to that goal, there's a lot of regulation, federalization, all kinds of things to get to that point. So I would love to see us try to help
Okay,
see our way clear.
other folks?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is a perfect project for us. It's good PR for the commission. And I think that everybody in the island wants to see that lighthouse restored. So I think it's absolutely should be a high priority for us.
Okay, David?
Yeah, I agree with everybody. I think we should do it.
People at the table, comments?
I think there's certainly enough money available in Nantucket that I think that's the least of our problems in final analysis. If we can get through all the governmental gobbledygook and get it to a point where, you know, we're looking for somebody to back this project, I think that's the easiest part of the whole thing. And if I may say, I've been down at Brant Point 2 days ago, and I took a good look around.
Yeah, what do you think?
And as an old carpenter, I gotta tell you, the sun is pulling nails out, the wood is coming apart, it needs shingles and everything else, but the first I heard about this was lead. And if lead is one of the problems, certainly stripping everything off the outside, but I mean the materials, takes care of that
Right.
process right off the bat. And then I don't know what's on the inside because I've never been on the inside. But as an old carpenter, I had a license. It was part of our requirements. We had to take a lead removal course, and I satisfied that. And I know a little bit about it. But you get somebody in there who's current and has got the guys with the balloon suits and everything else, you know, for, I don't know, $5,000, they could probably go in there and make that thing like brand new. And then all they gotta do is reshingle it and paint it with modern materials. And I think you're gonna restore the thing, other than what you can't see and what we don't know yet. But I don't see it being that much of a restorative thing, unless you have to go through the government process of like we're doing down on the Golan Lake. And then you go, then it's gonna get into some money. But if they would need to reshingle the place and strip all the black paint off and put new black paint on that isn't lead, and get rid of the whatever's on the inside, I don't see it's that big a project in terms of actually doing the work.
Correct.
It's getting to that point, I see, as most of the work.
Correct. On that note, if I may, I've had people say, and it's been on social media too, I've got the paintbrushes, I've got this, I'll go down and do it right now. And it's like, unfortunately, it's not that simple. If it was that simple, it would have been done by now.
That's
So,
why I preface that with,
yeah,
we've got people here who've
Yeah.
got the money. And I don't care how much it costs to get that done. And I think we've got enough people here that would pay to get it done.
Okay.
And I'd
All
like
right,
to
so-
see it, well, I'd
Oh, yeah.
like to see it continued for future maintenance too. So we have that all arranged and, you know, who's going to do that? And we don't have to reinvent this wheel every time it needs a new coat of paint.
Okay, so I guess, oh, sorry, Georgia and Angus, did you have anything else to add?
It's been said before, this just seems like the quintessential project for the historical commission to take on, if we can just connect the dots.
Yep, connecting the dots, that's what we're trying to do.
And I think Tom's right. If we get the mechanics underway so that a nonprofit can undertake the fundraising for having it done, that will happen in a nanosecond. I remember kind of, this is before your time, because my children were little, raising the money to save Sconset Lighthouse and move it was the easiest thing. You know, my kids were selling lemonade to help raise money to move Sconset Lighthouse. Everybody in the community wanted to do that. The same thing will happen with Brant Point. The same thing will even happen with Great Point.
bring back the
Let's just get the
slogan.
mechanics done.
Yeah.
I'm a keeper.
Yeah,
slogan-
yeah,
slogan.
has holding
It's,
hands around it and the whole thing.
Okay, so what I would like to do is add this part of the discussion about Brant Point to that letter, okay? Does anyone want to make that motion? Let's do this fun voting thing
So,
again.
so move. That's right.
Seconded.
Okay, all right. Any other discussion?
Yeah, could I make a suggestion that you have two separate letters because they're two separate lighthouses? And I want to, I want to be able to have them focused on independently as opposed to being a combined thing, because I think that the clarity of the distinction between what you're asking with respect to Great Point, as which is not a historic structure, and Brant Point, which is a historic structure, I think is an important difference in terms of the treatment of this looking at it point of view from the town's point of view, administration's point of view, and select board's point of view. So I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but I'm just suggesting that that you reconsider and make it separate proposals with respect to noting the distinction with respect to the two different lighthouses, which is why there are two separate requests.
So can I think what I'd like to do is work up the content and then talk to you, Ken and Holly, and decide the best way to organize it and present it. Would that be okay?
Happy to do that.
Okay. So what we're gonna do, if I can, I think I might be modifying the motion, is that we have some requests for each of these lighthouses. The chair will work up a letter. I might grab one or two commissioners to look at the letter, present the content to Ken and Holly for final advice about how to present it.
So
Okay,
So moved.
okay, all right, David,
Hi,
Clement,
Aye.
Nikki,
Aye.
yes,
Aye.
Georgia,
I,
Tom,
Aye.
and I'm also an aye. Great. Okay, we have about 20 minutes left of our meeting. And some of the other things. Okay, so we're not going to get through everything, but I do want to talk about the streetlights. So we have a sample. We're talking only about the decorative streetlights that are in town. These are owned by the town and are for purposes of energy conservation and aesthetics, because these high pressure sodium bulbs change color as they age. We'd like to move to LED. The town would like to move to LED. So we have a sample LED streetlight of the boulevard style, which is the one with the crown and the dome, as opposed to the one with the four sides. It's more of a colonial style. We have a sample one. It's outside of the town pool store. Did anyone have a chance to look at it at night and comment on both the light and the quality of and color and intensity of the light and the fixture itself?
I did. I like the looks of the fixture. And I thought that the quality of the light was good. The frosted glass. I might add something to it. I don't know. But I know that what was it? 70 something. I forget what the technical term was, that they toned it down from. So to
Dimmed it. in
Dimmed
terms
it
of its
too,
brightness, yeah.
right. And I don't know. I mean, I don't remember having seen it or was aware of it at the time going by there, which I do a lot. The difference between when it was brighter and when it was dimmer, but 70, whatever it is, seemed to be, adequate. And it looks good. I think it looks good.
So I had a problem with the frosted glass. I didn't have a problem with the quality of the light or the color. I think it's fantastic that they figured out now the LEDs have advanced enough that they can get these warmer lights. But I mean, frosted, well, I think, so my view on the lights is that they're not like historic, right? I mean, they're just enough. The lights have changed over time. We did in our earlier meeting, we did a whole discussion about the lights. So, so we just want them to fit in and look correct for Nantucket. And that what looking correct is could be influenced by, modern times and modern expectations. But I mean, that was just my opinion. I'm just one person. I didn't like the frosted glass. I felt like, well, we're trying to look historic, but there's nothing historic about frosted glass.
Well, when the lights are on, I thought that the frosted glass kind of disappeared in terms of, they look, if clear glass, which I understand where you're coming from, but it looks dirty after a more time. And
That's
frosted
true.
glass seems to negate some of that.
Well, except of course the two examples of frosted glass, which are the horse fountain and this one, are brand new, so they're not dirty yet.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have comments about it? What did everybody else think?
Yeah, I didn't get by there at night. Now that night is really night.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah, I
I'm
know,
already
that's
tucked in
true.
at home. But I hear what you're saying about the frosted glass, because what we're used to seeing is gas or incandescent behind clear glass. And it's, I mean, as far as dirt, it's, I would imagine that the clear glass is where you would see in sort of residue. I know surrounded with the Beacon Hill gas lights. And that was one of our things. When they were redoing Cambridge Street, we were actually able to take some of the lights that they were pulling away and put them into our courtyard. And so they're part of the Boston gas light system. And so as far as keeping them clean, that's something we do, you know, every year, twice a year. But there is a totally different look and feel to looking through glass at an element, a lighting element that feels more character defining of a historic light district than frosted.
I was
glass.
thinking that very same thing, and that might be why they went with frosted glass, so the element is not as recognized or as clear glass, or whatever it is.
Other comments about the light fixture?
I haven't seen them at night either, but I'm inclined to what Andy said. I prefer non-frosted.
Folks on the screen, Rita, did you take a look at it?
No, I haven't been downtown at night to see it lit up, but it looks good during the day.
And do you have an opinion about the frosted glass? And it also has brass railings, brass rails.
They won't look brassy. Really well.
Yeah.
No, they won't.
Right up.
Well, assuming if they're brass, I mean, are they brass?
I don't know. I'd have to ask Lauren. Ask Lauren that.
Were there other alternatives that they pursued? You know, do they look at, it's hard to comment on it. First of all, I haven't seen it personally, but it's always nice to compare a couple different items. Were they able to find one without frosted glass that still made sense?
I don't know why they chose the frosted glass. Do you know, Holly?
I do not
Can we
know.
get one with clear glass, just to see?
Well, there's also the no glass,
Mhm.
which is really the dark sky friendly option. And that's actually was quite important to the dark sky people because of the glare that is caused.
But is that
Yeah, it's
Is that
close to the
appropriate?
buildings, though.
That's the question. I mean, I'm intrigued by it, but so Mickey, what did you think? So you're asking about an option. Well, you haven't been able to see it.
No,
Will you be back soon?
I'll be back in sort of mid-July. I think I'll be around for the next meeting for our group, and I'll look at it at that time.
Clement or David or Ken, did anyone have a chance to see?
No, I'm sorry, I don't get to town at night.
with you? I'm on the other side too.
Right, and I have not either, sorry.
Well, so the dark sky folks wanted to have a lighting person come in and talk to us. And we all felt, well, Holly and I don't know, Lauren and I felt it was premature, but maybe it's not premature any longer now that we're actually moving ahead with more discussions about the LED. Well, any briefing from the town and Holly, from you, Ken and Holly, about the streetlights in general? I will say I did get an email or text the other day from someone at one of the agencies in town saying, you know, what are you guys, do you have anything you can do about the lights? Because they're horrible. They're all like akimbo and dirty, etc. And I was like, I don't know, maybe. So
Yeah.
where is this as far as progressing through the?
I think this commission is part of the process as far as giving that historic input. Obviously, Lauren really wants everybody's input, as well as, I mean, I think DPW as well, like what's the next step, that I don't know. But this would make sense because, you know, exactly that's the prime point there. You're getting comments, you know, probably town admin may be giving comments as well. What is historically appropriate? Maybe there are questions to ask, like, again, the brass. Are there other options? What's the BMPs on it? You know, on as far as maintenance goes, is that something that they plan to put into the program for the glass itself? And maybe that will weigh in whether or not the town stays with no glass or the frosted, you know, based on maintenance. But if you've got proof that it works to have a maintenance program to clean them,
Oh my
I don't
God.
know if, I know, can you imagine how many are there on Main Street? I don't know. I didn't find out how many there are. But I think the sheer fact that you all are being asked your opinions, I think is a good thing.
I think if they were out at Tom Never's head, the dark sky people might have a point.
Right.
But I can't see, in town. I mean,
Right.
there's so much other
There is.
ambient light around.
There
It
is.
just doesn't make any sense.
Oh, I don't know, they fixed the street lamp outside our house and I have to close the shutters in my son's room because there's so much light going right into his room. He can't sleep at night. So now he's like, they're behind furniture, so they're like permanently closed now because and the top of them is clear. They emit a huge light if you happen to be on a street.
Those are the dimmer bulbs.
I don't know. I just know that they're putting light right up into the windows, right up into the sky. So
That's not doing anybody.
it's not
You
good.
know,
It's not healthy.
Be down.
Yeah. Ken, what do you know about the progress of and priority of addressing an upgrade to the lights?
It has not been on my radar as of yet. I know that Lauren was the person responsible for coordinating from the town, but I don't know anything more than that.
So what do we all think for our July meeting? Maybe I could reach out to Gail Walker and see if it's time to schedule more information for the commission to get feedback on. We have this one light. This will give more people time to go look at it. But then also look at some of the other styles. I can't put my screen up to show you, but in our packet, when we discussed the streetlights, we did look at some lights that were up in Cambridge that didn't have glass. I personally think those are interesting. I mean, I think we can be flexible in our interpretation of these lights, but I'm just one.
Maybe
voice.
it'd be beneficial to have Lauren come.
Yeah,
I mean, personally, if this is a town really project,
Yeah.
having Lauren, I think would be a good idea.
I totally agree. So maybe Lauren, Gail Walker, and the representative, just somebody who can talk about the different fixtures and we can see some photos.
That'd be helpful, more knowledgeable information.
I wonder are they still stuck on the Boulevard style? Is that a definite commitment, or are there other like colonial styles?
I think we can have it. I think as far as style, they're more interested in looking to this commission.
Good.
Yeah, so that's why I was thinking the representative from the company could present a bunch of different styles.
For me, Hillary, I will make it into town at night and see this one light, but it would be nice when I've heard the dark skies presentation, it's kind of all about Kelvins or something.
Kelvin's, yeah.
Kelvin,
And to tell you the truth, I have not, I'm a visual person. I'd much rather see the differences than hear about LED Kelvin at 2000 versus 700 or whatever. I get lost in that. So yeah. So to say that I don't get into town, I'll try to get into town, but I think if we could have, I don't know if they could do kind of a dark room or somehow where you could get the feeling for what is meant by these different lights.
Well, that's why it's so important, I think, now to have the discussion, because we actually have an example. So it's a little more concrete. There's something to react to. Okay. Quick update. Holly, Mary Bergman, and I did offer the course to NAREB on selling historic homes. We had about 60 people in the room. We got great feedback. We had to follow the curriculum on selling historic homes. And we divvied up the curriculum and we each took a part of it. Holly talked all about the HDC and also worked in, we tried to talk about the curriculum, but then make it relevant to Nantucket. So there was always the general discussion, here's what you need to know about these important ideas, and here's what you'll see on Nantucket. So Holly talked about our design guidelines and about the rising sea level, the guidelines for elevating homes and for municipal preparedness. I talked a lot about the National Register. I shared the slides with you. I hope you were all able to get them, but I spent actually a lot of time developing what I was going to talk about. So I really hope they want to teach the course again, because it was very, when you have to teach something, you really have to learn it. So it was really, I'll tell you, I did have one takeaway thinking about the lighthouse and thinking about how important following our National Historic Landmark is for deciding what is contributing and not contributing, and teaching and educating people about that. It made me think about other structures that we might need to actually nominate individually because they're significant, but they're not contributing to our landmark.
Right.
And I can think of one. There might be others, Rita, that you and Holly, that you might have ideas about. But the Robert Venturi homes in Pacomo that are in, every architectural textbook.
Vincent Scully.
These Vincent Scully's book on postmodern architecture. These structures, I don't think they would be contributing to our landmark. I mean, they were built within the period of significance, but they weren't built in the style.
Right.
In the one of the themes. And so one of the things we've asked our consultant to advise us on is how do we deal with the 20th century? How do we parse the modern homes, the few modern homes that are here, and whether or not we can ask the HDC to protect them. And I think one way we can do that is to actually nominate them as individually significant, even if they're not contributing to our landmark. And I think that those, they're called the Trubeck home.
Yes.
Yeah, by Robert Venturi. And so that might be another, another recommendation, a nomination we might want to make and ask Holly to present it to the state committee.
I think that the town, CLG, both commissions would be remiss if that wasn't a priority. I think a lot of people know about them, but there's a lot of people that don't. So
Interestingly, I've heard from people who I believe rented one of those houses years ago, that they're impractical. They're really not Nantucket houses.
Oh, no.
In that I think it's the main house, it's just facing the wrong way. It gets this northeast wind and does not deal with it well. I don't know whether it's the way it was built or the design or the windows. As opposed to traditional Nantucket houses that were angled towards the south because that was where the wind was. And the north face was always the face that was least exposed. In those houses, that kind of iconography was completely ignored. So they're interesting in the sense that they're an architectural, egotistical, you might say, statement, but they're not a great iconic Nantucket house.
Right, but
Yeah, I think it was
And
just
that's what we
working
noted.
within the vernacular and playing with scale and proportion with those elements that can be found in a typical Nantucket house, but it's, I'm not sure how practical.
well, the Villa Savoy wasn't practical either. So a lot of modern architecture isn't practical.
But those are the timeframes that really, we have architecture that was built during, we didn't have any design guidelines, yet we were both a national and local district. So it's kind of, interesting to look at because we did not really have the design guidelines until I think 75.
Well,
Just a question, are we going to be closed soon? Because it is 10 o'clock and I've got another commitment, but
Me too.
yeah, well, is there anything else that we need to talk about? I would still like to meet with Patrick Reed. Holly, I don't know if you can facilitate that.
I
but,
would reach
you
out
know,
to the planning director on that and because I don't know what his schedule is. And I know that's
Yeah,
facilitated.
maybe
him.
this summer he could come to a meeting. It's important to meet with him. And I don't have updates on any of the work plan items. A lot of effort went into the teaching the, Ken, what did you think of our workshop? You were there.
Oh, I thought it was good. I mean, the fact is that you're able to tie in the images in the community, having it being relevant to what was being taught in the course. So it was a good job.
That was one thing that Isabella said, that she's like, yeah, you guys did really great of being able to tie it into Nantucket. She's like, this is awesome. So I didn't hear anything negative from her, and she's the one that has to give the check
Yeah,
for them.
yeah,
So
and the turnout was great. I just think we need a microphone if we're gonna do this again.
yeah,
I
that
got
might
some
help.
feedback that people had a hard time.
That's correct.
Okay, does anyone want to talk about any other business?
Well, I would just like to say that David and I haven't spoken. Now that I'm back on island, I'm looking forward to being able to work with David and Bryce on this revolving fund
Okay,
idea.
I'd love to help with that too.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think the next step was to engage with local banks. Is that right?
Ask some of the nonprofits and see what we can find out about need and structure.
Well, let's connect Georgia and Hillary. Let's have a conversation.
I move we adjourn.
Second,
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Hi,
Okay.
thank
All
you.
right, everyone. I hope to see you. Clement and I hope we're still here in July.
Yeah, we do.
Up to us.
We'll know next week.
No, next week. Yeah. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.